Can I say something just to the people in the room that won't? Good, thank you. Okay. I'm just chafing to get started because this is one of my favorite things when the community gathers, because we're not just Midvale, we're Midvale community. And it's the broader community, but it's also us as a community together. And I am so grateful for my experiences here with all of you in many different roles. And then it makes me think, oh, do I have a contribution that I could make? Well, I know some things about family stories. And I get to be on the library committee, which is a joy. And so I got a phone call that things had shifted in the adult education. And was there a chance that Gary and I could do a program one of the Sundays in Advent? And I didn't even pause to take a breath. I just said, absolutely, absolutely. Because two of the things I love are books and sharing the good news. And boy, do we have good news. And we need to keep sharing it and sharing it with others. And here's my last thing, and then I'm going to just go. One of the things I really appreciate about Midvale is we say that we welcome everyone because Jesus welcomes everyone. And I'm going to be saying in the middle, when they thought about the children, and even the children who were supposedly children of our enemy, what do we also know about Jesus? Jesus loved the children. And when we see some of those commonalities, we appeal to the best aspects of ourselves and others. So that's what we've got. That's what we're going to roll out for you. And I was enthusiastic about this first book before, and then all of a sudden I learned about this new book about a German girl. So we're going to have a German girl's experience of the airlift and an American pilot. And if you can stay till the end, they converge and they meet each other and they mean something to each other because of each of their perspectives. So the story gets even more powerful. If any of these really interest you, we have a bag. Oh, we have something over here that lists the titles, because giving somebody a book, a story can be a great thing. Might be a little late for Christmas 2022, but you can think about that. And we're also going to have something that is going to encourage you to retell this story, because experience and research shows that if you tell a story to somebody else, a story that you've maybe heard recently, that helps you remember it as well as gives them a gift. So I'm conscious that I'm repeating myself. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm just the voice. Gary really gets the hard part set up. Emily is there. Brooke is here. This is the community again. And we're glad, we're just so glad that you're here. We're going to be thinking about these books. And at the end, we've got a giveaway. So Gary, I don't want to take these Hershey candy bars back. So please help me remember not to forget to do this, because I might be going. We're ready. Thank you for coming. Welcome. I think this is going to be really engaging. The people in Zoom, I see some names I know. That's great. Oh, there's Ann on our library committee. This is all good. And we're going to start. I was taught that you plan your work and then you work your plan. So I have to look at the lesson plan and just see. We're ready to start. That's sort of the sequence we'll do. This first one you might have seen on public television. Often on public television, they do something from the Mormon Church. Now, the Mormon Church is a Christian church. They do some things that we don't do. They have some beliefs that we don't have. but we have some similar beliefs that we really share in common. This is a great time to think of the things that we have in common. So the last thing to tell you is one of the great things is we've now learned some technology, not me, but Gary has learned some technology that we can do a better job here. And Gary's daughter said that his grandchildren in 6th grade and 3rd grade would have known how to do this already. So, well, I didn't make that up, did I? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this first book is Christmas from the Heavens. It's the true story. So this is true of the Berlin candy bomber. You're going to meet the American pilot who's really, then we're going to close with this because there's a 13-minute DVD that shows how they demonstrate this story. And you see this man, Hal, who, when this was done, he was 92. And that was 9 years ago. This man just died this year, 2022, at the age of 101. Wow, that's worth thinking about, if for nothing else. But we're going to find out about the values that are so important. So we're ready to roll. Here we go. Christmas from Heaven. This is the British, the French, the Americans, and the Russians were allies. And when Hitler was defeated, Hitler had some really bad ideas and some bad traits. The German people were following behind him. It wasn't a question of choice. And then when the war was over, they had a Russian sector and then the American sector. And oh, this is the part of Berlin. They had the Russian zone, the British, the French, the Americans, and then the Russian zone. And Berlin was in the Russian zone. So Stalin was the leader, and Stalin wanted to really get this part of Germany attached to him. So he really tried to make them dependent on him, and created a really tough situation. So, and the Berlin Airlift was the response. So that's a little geography and a little history. Okay. Tom Brokaw is going to be the one who reads it on the DVD and introduces you to Hal and things like that. And we're ready. Christmas from Heaven, the true story of the Berlin candy bomber.
Sometimes you'll be able to read what's on the screen, and sometimes you just need to really listen to what Eric's reading. He's reading from the book rather than.
On Christmas Eve, 1948, somewhere between Wiesbaden and Berlin, a 27-year-old American pilot gazed into the night sky. The heavens were so full of stars, it seemed they would overflow and tumble to earth in a brilliant display of Christmas generosity and joy. Hal, as he was known to his crew, wrapped his hands around the yoke of his C-54 cargo plane, packed with 20,000 pounds of flour. This is the real spirit of Christmas, he thought to himself as he guided his plane toward Tempelhof Air Base in West Berlin. When World War II had ended 3 years earlier, Germany and its capital city were divided between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. Then in a grab for power, Stalin blocked ground transportation into the city. To preserve freedom and to keep 2.5 million West Berliners from starving, the United States and Britain began transporting food and other basic supplies by air. Hal was one of hundreds of American pilots who participated in the historic Berlin Airlift, dubbed Operation Vittles.
Share with them that this is the real picture that have been imported.
we want to make a distinction that, and this dates us when film was only black and white. It was always black and white. There was no color film. So those are pictures from that time, 1948. And then these are the drawings of the illustrations for what I call family literature, which means you hear it, but you also get to see it. Okay. I'm going to keep going. May I keep going? Thank you. That snowy Christmas Eve, as Hal radioed for clearance to Aunt, his mind wandered back 6 months to the day, a day that had changed his life. He had been standing at the end of the Tempelhof runway, taking home movies of arriving planes, when he noticed about 30 children on a grassy strip just beyond a barbed wire fence. I don't know if they make barbed wire. I think they're all electric fences, but I remember, coming home with some rips on my jeans and things like that from climbing over barbed wire. In broken English, the children asked him about the planes, how much flour each one carried, and whether the airlift would continue. Although the children had been on meager rations, they were more concerned with freedom than with flour. They wanted what Hal had always had, the opportunity to pursue their dreams. For nearly an hour, Hal answered their questions before saying goodbye. As he turned away, one question lingered in his mind. What makes these kids different? All over the world, children were known to beg candy from American servicemen. These children had little to eat, no candy at all, yet they were grateful for what the airlift had given them and asked for nothing. Their gratitude melted Hal's heart. Instinctively, he wanted to give something back. Digging into his pockets, he found only 2 sticks of gum. From little things come great things, his father used to say. A broad smile crossed Hal's boyish face. Giving so little to so many could create a squabble, he reasoned, but a quiet voice urged him on. Hal broke the gum into 4 pieces and passed the 4 pieces through the fence. If you can see in his fingers, he's holding up 2 sticks of gum. Without a word, the 4 children tore the gum wrappers into strips and passed the wrappers to others. One by one, each small nose was pressed to the paper, breathing in the minty smell. Never had he seen such expressions of joy and wonder, even at Christmas. As Hal watched in amazement, his mind raced. If only I had more to give, he thought. He had his own rations of gum and chocolate. Maybe his buddies would be willing to donate theirs. Just then another C-54 roared over his head, and an idea formed in his mind. I could drop candy from the sky, he said. He quickly explained his plan to the children. When they asked how to recognize his plane, he remembered flying over the family farm back home. I'll wiggle my wings, he announced, spreading his long arms and waving them up and down. The children giggled with delight. Just promise me you'll share the candy, he said. All heads nodded in agreement. And pause there, because one of the things in another version of this that I read was the German children had to ask him what the word wiggle means, because they didn't know the word wiggle in their language. So, he's trying to show wiggle there. Just so much humanity in these stories. Okay, here we go. By the next day, Hal had secretly enlisted his crew to donate their rations and make parachutes from handkerchiefs. As Hal's plane approached the runway and the grass came into view, he wiggled his wings, and a knot of waiting children exploded, running and jumping into the air. With the precision of bombardiers, the airmen pushed the candy out the flare chute, and white canopies floated to earth. 30 children ran with open arms to catch the treasures. So on the right, like close to me, that's a view of what it would look like on the ground when those planes were flying over. Hal and his buddies were as excited as the children. The thrill of giving was irresistible. Soon they were dropping parachutes every day, hundreds each time. The press caught on and reports went out. Mail for, quote, Uncle Wiggly Wings began piling up at the base operations. Hal found himself standing before his superior, expecting to be court-martialed. But the colonel surprised him. Halvorsen, he said, General Tunner thinks this is a good idea. Soon, hundreds of airmen were donating rations. Operation Little Vittles quickly captured the imagination of people everywhere. Candy and handkerchiefs poured in from around the world. Hal became known as the Candy Bomber and the Chocolate Pilot. Now, I'm sort of glad we don't have young kids to explain what bombs were, what was associated with these bombers, which is bombs dropping on them, bombs dropping on people. So here the story continues. We're going to see how across West Berlin, children gathered to catch the parachutes and share the candy with each other. And they sent hundreds of thank you notes, letters like the one addressed to Dear Uncle of the Heavens. Some included maps and instructions. Fly along the big canal. To the second bridge, turn right 1 block. It gets better. I live in the bombed out home on the corner. I'll be in the backyard every day at 2. Drop the chocolates there. Day by day, the parachutes brought peace and the candy renewed hope. The children made friends of former enemies, and their parents' hearts were softened. The wounds of war began to heal. And then there's some thank you notes on the right margin there in that picture. By December, the Little Vittles operation had gathered 18 tons of candy from American candy makers, and 3 more tons came in from private donors. The spirit of Christmas was descending on people everywhere, lifting them up in the joy of giving. That Christmas Eve, the 27-year-old American pilot blinked back tears. The stars overhead could not be more beautiful than the skies overflowing with parachutes, tumbling to earth in a brilliant display of Christmas generosity and joy. So people would say this was especially true and meaningful at Christmas time. Hal's father was right. From little things come big things. Hal in his cockpit pulled back on the yoke as his wheels rolled onto the familiar runway. This is the real spirit of Christmas, to give whatever we have, no matter how small the gift. In that moment, Hal Halvorsen prayed for courage to never give anything less. Now, on the far, can you go back 1, please? Maybe. You see, there's a sign that they're holding up. It says, the blockade ends. The airlift wins. So there we are. And this is one more page on the candy bomber. Then I was going to ask, but we don't really have the young kids to make an impression on. Men in the group. Remember growing up when you were told to have a handkerchief in your pocket? Yeah. Men who have a handkerchief in their pocket today, raise your hand. Yeah. It dates us, actually. Well, it dates me. I'll admit, but it was sort of if you had a bloody nose or somebody near you needed, it was a gentlemanly thing to be prepared with your handkerchief. This is a whole different use of handkerchiefs, but all these things were sent. They counted how many handkerchief-sized things they could make out of a real parachute that had to be retired and things like that. The whole discussion. Let me tell you a little bit about, well, let me make sure I'm here. Okay, 9:33. Oh, okay, right. All right. The last thing I want to say is, over here, Hershey bars, this is the bag, and it says since, and then there's a date. Anybody want to predict when Hershey bars were started? It's not in the 1900s, I'll tell you that. 1894. Pennsylvania boy. How close is Hershey, Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh? Okay.
First, they have the distance as their traffic light or their street lights.
Can you repeat that?
I'm moving.
The red light rather than a green. There it is. So in Hershey's about an hour, a little bit over an hour from Pittsburgh, where I grew up. And at Hershey, I had said earlier, the street lights are made out of or look like the Chris's that Hershey makes. So some of you may have been there along the way.
Thanks. And things have changed. I think they only made Hershey bars. Now they have Hershey's with almonds and Hershey's crunchy Hershey's with rice and all those kinds of things, Are we a better world for that? You answer that question. Okay, we're going to move to our second story, and then we're going to then get some reactions for you when we hear the convergence of these two stories. This is called Mercedes and the Chocolate Pilot. The subtitle is A True Story. We have to keep reminding ourselves, they make a lot of historical fiction and things like that. These are true people. This is a true story of the Berlin airlift and the candy that dropped from the sky. This girl's name is Mercedes. There she is. These chickens are going to be important. And we get to her title page. You get to see sort of the devastation, the holes from bombings and things like that, that are what the people lived with. Okay, Gary, one more. I'll go there in a minute. There's nothing to see, so yeah. All right, Berlin, 1948. This is the devastation on the ground. Okay. In a move to defeat Hitler and his plans, they really had to rain some destruction on the buildings where people lived, where people worked, and things like that. And now we're going to meet Mercedes. One late August day, Mercedes slipped her hand under the white chickens she kept in the small courtyard garden behind her apartment building. Please let there be eggs, she wished, as the silvered wing planes flew above like guardian angels. But yet, like yesterday and the day before, the chickens' necks were empty except for one small egg. Mercedes fed each chicken a worm, tried not to cry. She loved her four feathered pets, but Mama would not be happy. Eggs were more precious than gold in West Berlin during the Russian blockade. Tomorrow, I want an egg from each of you. See her finger? She scolded the hen sternly, or Mama will say we can't afford to keep you and must have you for dinner instead. Walking up the bomb-splintered steps to her apartment, Mercedes was sure her white chickens were just too scared of the thundering planes of the airlift to lay their eggs. Night and day, they roared overhead like huge silver birds into nearby Tempelhof airfield to unload their supplies. But Mercedes would never complain about the great soaring grocery stores that everyone called raisin bombers because they carried yummy raisins to eat. They carried flour and clothing and coal too, and something else. One day, Mama read her a newspaper story about the candy that came from the planes. The story told about the wonderful American chocolate pilot, Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen. Every day he rained down sweets on the children who cheered the plane's landing on Tempelhof's runway. As Mama read, Mercedes learned how the tall, friendly pilot had talked with these children one day at the fence near the runway's end. The children didn't ask him for candy, Mama read, only sweet freedom. Still, before he had to go, he searched his pocket for gum, but he found only 2 sticks and there were 30 children. What did he do, Mama? Mercedes asked. He split the sticks for 4 lucky children, and the others tore slivers of the foil to smell as their sweet treat. And then, though he knew he could get in terrible trouble, the pilot promised the children he'd drop gum and candy to them from his plane the next day. He stretched out his arms and told them to look for, you got it, of the plane's wings. Ah, you're a presenter's dream. I say that about you. That night, the pilot made small candy-filled parachutes from handkerchiefs. Mama read on, and he dropped them in secret to the children at the airfield the next day. He made 3 candy drops after that, before his troubles began. Children's letters addressed to the chocolate pilot and Uncle Wiggly Wings began to arrive at the airfield. Then a candy bar almost hit a reporter on his head, and the colonel in charge at Tempelhof read about the pilot's secret in the newspaper. He was caught. Oh, did the colonel yell at him? Mercedes cringed, but Mama laughed and said, only a little. And then the colonel shook his hand and told him, keep dropping and keep him informed. But won't he run out of candy? Mercedes asked anxiously, but Mama laughed again. People from all over America now send the pilot handkerchiefs and for parachutes and so much candy that it fills 2 large railroad boxcars. A few weeks later, as Mercedes heaved a sigh of relief. May I go and catch some candy at Tempelhof too, Mama? She asked. Oh, not by yourself, Liebchen, Frau Simon warned quickly. The streets are too dangerous with soldiers and rubble everywhere. But I promise to take you to the airfield soon to see the chocolate pilots, Mama said, hugging Mercedes close to her. Mercedes smelled the smoky scent that still lingered in Mama's blue dress from the time when bombs had fallen during the war. She knew Mama cried quietly at night for Papa, who hadn't come home from the fighting. Don't worry, Mama, I'll stay close when we go. I'll even walk with my toes in your shadow. Well, except when I run for our candy, she added happily. A few weeks later, as Mama promised, Mercedes stood at the airfield fence with the other hopeful children. Above her, thundering planes dropped out of the heavens, shaking the ground at her feet. And then a great cheer went up from the children when they spotted the wiggle of the chocolate pilot's wings. Suddenly, many small white parachutes floated down like marshmallow clouds. Mercedes ran excitedly with the other children, with her hands stretched high to capture the prize in the sky. But at the very last second, a large boy nearby reached up a little higher and grabbed the parachute drifting toward her. the look in his eyes as he bit into the silky, smooth chocolate. It was all Mercedes could think about the whole sad way home. That night, listening to the sound of the plane's engines above her home, Mercedes wiped at tears. If only she'd caught the chocolate, it wouldn't matter if the chickens laid eggs. The candy would make her and Mama so happy. But what could she do? Then Mercedes remembered from the newspaper that children wrote letters to the chocolate pilot. With the moon as her lamp, she got out of bed to write one too. Carefully as she'd learned in school, she penned, "Dear chocolate pilot, we live near the airfield at Tempelhof, and our chickens think your airplanes are chicken hawks, so they become frightened when you fly over to land. They run in shelter, and some molt with no more eggs from them. It's a big problem for us. We need the eggs. But when you fly over the garden and see the white chickens, please drop some candy there, and all will be okay. I don't care if you scare them. Your little friend Mercedes." Frau Simon mailed Mercedes' letter the next day, quietly keeping the thought behind her lips that such a busy pilot didn't have time to make every child's dream come true. But Mercedes now waited in the garden with the white chickens every day, wishing on each angel plane above for her candy to fall from the sky. Returning to Rhine-Main Air Force Base in Frankfurt, where he slept and ate between his 3 round-trip flights into Berlin each day, Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen put down a handful of letters on his cot. It was late October. For months now, children's letters with crayon-colored drawings arrived for him from all over Berlin. Each week, the many letters were translated by 2 German secretaries and given to Lieutenant Halvorsen. A few got his personal reply, but all the letters touched his heart. Some even made Lieutenant Halvorsen laugh till he cried. A 9-year-old boy, Peter Zimmerman, wrote the chocolate pilot that his legs were too short to run fast for the candy, so he drew a map to his house. Remember, we've heard this one before, but like somebody said to me when they were dyeing cloth in India, they learned that you weave the cloth, then you put it in the vat of dye, you take it out, you spread it in the sun bleaches it as it dries, then you dye it some more. As you listen to again, more will stick with you. So I'm going to read this again. It's just as cute as it was the first time. Fly along the big canal at the second bridge, turn right. I live in the bombed out house on the corner. I'll be in the backyard every day at 2. Drop it there. Lieutenant Halvorsen tried to find Peter's house from the sky, but when he couldn't, he boxed up candy bars and gum and sent them to Peter's address by West Berlin post. But not before he heard from Peter again, writing, "No chocolate yet? You're a pilot. I gave you a map. How did you guys win the war anyway?" Now on this late October day, Lieutenant Halvorsen quickly opened the letters. One by one, he read them, and then he lingered over a letter from a little girl with white chickens in her backyard. He smiled and laughed and fought back at tears when he got to the end. "Please drop the candy there when you see the white chickens. Your little friend, Mercedes." Lieutenant Halvorsen softly rubbed his head. His little friend's sweet hope was as fragile as the eggs and as precious to him as the white chickens were to her. But would he ever find the garden with the chickens? Even with Peter's map, he couldn't find his yard by the canal. As October, so here's another just experience of the destruction in Berlin. October days passed into November. A thick, soupy fog began to blanket Berlin's sky. Walking home with Mama, Mercedes prayed the pilots would be safe today. She prayed too that the fog would lift so the chocolate pilot could find her chickens in the yard. No candy had rained down yet. Maybe he'd stopped looking for the chickens. Please don't forget me. Mercedes whispered to the white sky above. Frau Simon saw the troubled look on Mercedes' face. She squeezed her little hands with love, but said nothing. But once inside their apartment at 12 Handelstrasse, Frau Simon couldn't wait to give Mercedes the surprise that had come for her earlier that day. It was a package mailed from Tempelhof Airfield, all neatly wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Quickly, Mercedes tore into the package. As she opened the box, the sweet smell of candy spread thick as jam through the room. Chocolate bars, pieces of white and green mint gum, pink bubble gum too, and lifesaver rolls. Does this bring back memories for anybody? Lifesaver rolls with the rain. Yep. Colored like rainbows. Her chocolate pilot had found her. Mercedes saw Mama blinking back happy tears. She gave her a thick chocolate bar to eat and chose a creamy bar with nuts and caramel nougat for herself. She slipped off its wrappers and peeled back the silver foil. Little by little, she bit into the dark sweetness, letting the smooth taste melt away on her tongue. With each silky bite, she closed her eyes for a second, as if she just tasted heaven. Inside the box was a letter for Mercedes. Mein lieb Mercedes, my little Mercedes, Frankfurt, November 4th, 1948. Thank you for your small letter. Not every day do I fly over your home, but surely often. I didn't know that in Handelstrasse there lived such a nice little girl. If I could fly a few rounds over Friedmau, I would surely find the garden with the white chickens. But for this, there is not enough time. I hope that through what is in this letter, I give you a little joy. Your chocolate uncle, Gail Halvorsen. The memory of this day would stay with her for the rest of her life. A few months later, in January of 1949, Lieutenant Halvorsen thought of little Mercedes and Peter Zimmerman and all the children in Berlin as he flew out of Tempelhof for the very last time. It didn't seem possible that his 7 months tour of duty in the Berlin airlift had ended. He was sad to go, but as the clouds parted toward America, he smiled, knowing his candy drops to the children would go on with the help of trusted pilot friends. What Lieutenant Halvorsen didn't know that day was that his story in Berlin wasn't over. So in the epilogue, talks about him returning to Berlin with his wife and his 5 children when he was the new colonel in charge at the Air Force Base and the representative to Berlin. One night in 1972, Colonel Halvorsen accepted a dinner invitation from a Berlin couple whom he'd never met. A young mother of 2 boys greeted him warmly at an old apartment building near Tempelhof. The young woman was also a pilot. From her china cabinet where she kept her treasure, she took out a letter. You see what's coming? Please read this, she said to Colonel Halvorsen. The letter began, Mein lieb Mercedes, I ate the candy little by little. Mercedes' smile quivered as her eyes welled with tears of love and gratitude. I ate the candy, but I'll keep the letter forever. Mercedes showed Colonel Halvorsen the window where she had watched the planes and showed him the yard where the white chickens had once lived. Then she tried to tell him what his gift had meant to her. Colonel Halvorsen's eyes misted over. Oh, yes, he knew, but how could he tell Mercedes the joy that had come to him from 2 sticks of gum? He had seen a world war go by and a Cold War begin, but he'd always found in children's eyes the hope for a better tomorrow. No, he couldn't explain, so he penned a wish for Mercedes on his original letter. Dear Mercedes and family, I'm very happy to greet you and your wonderful family after 24 years. I wish you the best future possible, with many sweet things to come. For many years, Mercedes kept the letter in her china cabinet, and each time he visited her, Colonel Halvorson left a new message of friendship on it. The letter, still Mercedes' most prized possession, is now kept in a bank vault and only brought out when her beloved chocolate pilot comes to visit once more. But every day when Mercedes walks under the skies of a free Berlin, the sweet memory of his gift still soars in her heart like the great silver plane of hope. Okay. So this is some information. I'm just going to read this, but talks about back in the United States, the people in Hal's town of Chicopee, Massachusetts, they took up his cause. They used an old fire station as the center. They organized local businesses in 22 skills, and they supplied 11,000 yards of ribbon, 2,000 sheets to make the parachutes, 3,000 handkerchiefs, 18 tons of candy and gum, and at peak production, 800 pounds of candy-tied parachutes were shipped to Rhine, Maine every other day. By January, when Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen had left Berlin, he'd flown 126 airlift missions, and in all, during the 15 months of the blockade, Gail and his squadron dropped more than 250,000 candy-loaded parachutes, more than 20 tons of chocolate to Berlin's 100,000 children, such as his beloved Mercedes. 74, he retired from the U.S. Air Force after 31 years of service. During his many visits to Berlin, he rained down candy to the children and the grandchildren of the original Berliners at the fence. He had flown candy to refugee camps in Bosnia in 1994, and in 1999 to Camp Hope, the U.S. built shelter for Albanians fleeing from Kosovo. Gail had rained his candy, sky candy, on his own 24 grandchildren and to the 4 children of Mercedes and her husband, Peter. These are ripples. When we make school packs for the children, the schools in Africa, these are ripples. These are powerful things to do. Okay. Okay, Gary, we're on the back of the lesson plan. Sometimes you can't change your habits. Turn to somebody close to you and think about filling in the blank of it. I didn't know before that. Oh, I think I'll remember, ... And then we're going to show this 13-minute video, which is better than listening to me. So turn to somebody, please. We're not going to record you, but just turn and think about you didn't know before, or I think I'll remember. The DVD is queued up. Okay. I'm going to call you back so we can keep going and get the 13-minute video. But I want to tell you at the end, if the book titles are interesting to you, here's this runoff. Okay, it just mentions the 4 titles in case you want to look for them in the library, or you want to think, oh, I could, in my family, when I don't know what else to buy for somebody, I buy them a book. You could give somebody a book, gift them with this story. And then Gary and I are going to meet you probably by the back door. This is going to be a
It's on the table.
What? Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I learned in this story was I was 3 years old at the time. I was born in 45. So I was 3 years old when this was happening. And our family, now I understand it, sent chocolate to Germany. We had relatives there, but they also sent chocolate. It was probably a part of this. I can't go back and ask my mom and dad that story. Someday I'll go there and I'll say, do you remember? But anyways, this story kind of made all of that kind of fall in place in a different way, because I think whether it's true or not, I think it's a wonderful connection.
Amen, brother. So this is something that we'd like you to take with you. It says, research and experience have shown that retelling a story you've just heard helps you remember the story better. So we hope maybe you'll retell a story of the candy bomber or Mercedes that made up our program that you experienced at the Intergenerational. And to sweeten the experience, there you go. I mean, as soon as they called me from the adult education department, I said, I'm going to see if there's any leftover Halloween candy. Well, a little motivation, you know. So if you turn it down, that's fine, but we hope you'll take some. And actually, you could probably take 2.
Right.
And that would be good. So that's going to be, we're going to show the 13-minute video, and I'm going to say 30 seconds worth at the end to thank you all again, because presenting to you is a privilege, presenting to you is a joy, and being part of this community that has so many things that we're trying to do, this even more to share the good news. This is it. So here we go. This is the video. Tom Brokaw is going to be starting. You're going to see the auditorium. Don't film me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome internationally renowned broadcaster, commentator, and author, Mr. Tom Brokaw.
We got the video better this time. We haven't gotten the audio yet. Hang on. I could always narrate. Seriously, I mean, the Mormons know how to do pageantry. They really do. And they go to
On Christmas Eve, 1948, somewhere
oh,
between Wiesbaden and Berlin, a 27-year-old American pilot gazed into the night sky. The heavens were so full of stars, it seemed they would overflow and tumble to earth in a brilliant display of Christmas generosity and joy. Hal, as he was known to his crew, wrapped his hands around the yoke of a C-54 cargo plane, which was packed with 20,000 pounds of flour. This is the real spirit of Christmas, he thought to himself, as he guided his plane toward Tempelhof Air Base in West Berlin. When World War II had ended 3 years earlier, Germany and its capital city were divided between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. Then, in a grab for power, Stalin blocked ground transportation into the city. So, to preserve freedom and keep 2.5 million West Berliners from starving, the United States and Great Britain began transporting food and other basic supplies by air. Hal was one of hundreds of Americans who participated in the historic Berlin airlift, which was called Operation Vittles. That snowy Christmas Eve, as Hal radioed for clearance to land, his mind wandered back 6 months to the day that changed his life. He had been standing at the end of the Tempelhof runway taking home movies of arriving planes when he noticed about 30 children on a grassy strip just beyond a barbed wire fence. In broken English, they asked about the planes, how much flour each one carried, and whether the airlift would continue. Although the children had been on meager rations, they were more concerned with freedom than with flour. They wanted what Hal had, the opportunity to pursue their dreams. So for almost an hour, Hal answered their questions before saying goodbye. But as he turned away, one question lingered in his mind. What made these kids different? All over the world, children were known to beg candy from American servicemen. These children had little to eat and no candy at all, yet they were grateful for what the airlift had given them and asked for nothing. Their gratitude melted Hal's heart. Instinctively, he wanted to give something back. Digging into his pockets, he found only 2 sticks of gum. From little things come big things, his father used to say. A broad smile crossed Hal's boyish face. Giving so little to so many could cause a squabble, he reasoned, but a quiet voice within him urged him on. So Hal broke the gum into 4 pieces and passed it through the fence. Without a word, the 4 children tore the gum wrappers into strips and passed them to the others, one by one. Each small nose was pressed to the paper, breathing the minty smell. Never had he seen such expressions of joy and wonder, even at Christmas. As Hal watched in amazement, his mind raced. If only I had more to give, he thought. He had his own rations of gum and chocolate. Maybe his buddies would be willing to donate theirs.
Great sound effect.
Just then, another C-54 roared over his head, and an idea formed in his mind. I could drop candy from the air, he said to himself. He quickly explained his plan to the children. When they asked how to recognize his plane, he remembered flying over the family farm back home. I'll wiggle my wings, he announced, spreading his long arms and waving them up and down. The children giggled with delight. Just promise me you'll share the candy, he said. All heads nodded in agreement. But the next day, Hal had secretly enlisted his crew to donate their rations and to make parachutes from handkerchiefs. As Hal's plane approached the runway and the grass came into view, he wiggled his wings, and a knot of waiting children exploded, running and jumping in the air. With the precision of bombardiers, the airmen pushed the candy out of the flare chute, and white canopies floated to earth. 30 children ran with open arms to catch the treasures. Hal and his buddies were as excited as the children. The thrill of giving was irresistible. Soon, they were dropping parachutes every day, hundreds of them. The press caught on. Reports went out. Mail for Uncle Wiggly Wings began piling up at base operations. Then Hal found himself standing before his superior, expecting to be court-martialed. But the colonel surprised him. Halvorsen, he said, General Tunner thinks it's a good idea. Soon, hundreds of airmen were donating rations. Operation Little Victuals quickly captured the imagination of people everywhere. Candy and handkerchiefs poured in from around the world. Hal became known as the Candy Bomber and the Chocolate Pilot. Across West Berlin, children gathered to catch the parachutes and share the candy with each other. And they sent hundreds of thank you letters, like the one addressed to Dear Uncle of the Heaven. Some included maps and instructions. Fly along the big canal to the second bridge. Turn right 1 block. I live in the bombed out house on the corner. I'll be in the backyard every day at 2 p.m. Drop the chocolate there. Day by day, the parachutes brought peace and the candy renewed hope. The children made friends of their former enemies and their parents' hearts were softened. The wounds of war began to heal. By December, the Little Victuals operation had gathered 18 tons of candy from American candy makers, and 3 more tons came in from private donors. The spirit of Christmas was descending on people everywhere, lifting them up in the joy of giving. That Christmas Eve, the 27-year-old American pilot blinked back tears. The stars overhead could not be more beautiful than skies overflowing with parachutes tumbling to earth in a brilliant display of Christmas generosity and joy. His father was right. From little things come big things. Hal, in his cockpit, pulled back on the yoke as his wheels rolled onto the familiar runway. This is the real spirit of Christmas, to give whatever we have, no matter how small the gift. In that moment, Hal Halvorsen prayed for the courage to never give anything less. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the candy bomber himself, Colonel Gail Hal Halvorsen, now 92 years young. Welcome, Colonel Halvorson. I've known about you for a long time, but it's just such a great pleasure to have gotten to know you this week as well. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you went on to become the commander of Tempelhof Air Base. You served in uniform for many more years, and you've been an ambassador of goodwill around the world. We thought it only fitting that we should give you 2 sticks of gum because they changed your life and the lives of so many.
Well, thank you, Tom. This little gift changed my life forever. Thank you very much.
And you're wearing the same flight suit that you wore back then.
I got it big enough to start with.
That's important. I think you in so many ways embody the spirit of Christmas, the generosity of your efforts on behalf of those people who had been our enemies after all, the gratitude that they gave you in return, and the idea that we should all try to live together in peace here on earth. Hal, I want to wish you Merry Christmas, and I think we should wish everyone here Merry Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a good one.
To order a DVD of the full version of this program called Home for the Holidays or the companion CD, visit Mormon Tabernacle.
Thank you. I know that was redundant, but that will help us sort of hang on to those. I have to say thank you, but I also want to say to you, there's a table with the blue. And did Ginny come and put her things? Oh, okay. Gary has the thing with the candy on the back, reminding you about retelling the story. These are things, yep, he's waving, that's good. These are just gently used children's books. When I was teaching, if you did some multicultural things, you could do some Christmas things. So if you did Hanukkah or Chinese New Year or Kwanzaa, if you did at least 2 with Christmas, you could do so. I have these that are free for the giveaway. And when we pass them out upstairs, people would say, I'd say, these are free. They say, how much do they cost? I say, no, they're free. They're free. Take 1, take 2, take as many. I'd love to see the table empty. Thank you for being part of our community together. I'm so grateful. I'm so inspired by what we can do together when there's groups working on the library or groups working in Vacation Bible School or all those, the pageant that was last week. It's just a wonderful place. Okay, thank you, Gary. I've gone over 1 minute. We know some of you are going to worship. Clap. This was supposed to be inspiring and heartwarming. Clap twice if you thought it was inspiring. Yeah. And heartwarming, I hope. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Gary. But most of all, thank you for being here. We'll be by the door. Yeah, turn off the microphone.